This is the amazing Sigma 20mm f1.4. Look at that physical aperture ring that can be clicked on or clicked off for smooth aperture pulls in video. A programmable button, a huge smooth focusing ring. It's the perfect lens for astrophotography, Milky Way photography, low light landscapes, wide angle street photography, low light vlogging, especially since you might need a little room to crop if you're going to stabilize and post. But there is another that you should consider, and that is the Sony 20mm f1.8. The Sony here has all those same features, a clickable or declickable aperture, a programmable button, and if you didn't notice, it's significantly smaller. It also takes 67mm filters instead of a big 82mm filter, so if you do use filters, that can save you a few bucks. The Sigma is $800, the Sony is $900, but there's a bigger difference in that. The Sigma is f1.4, while the Sony is f1.8. So the Sigma gives you an extra 2/3 stop of light, which improves its low light performance, which gives you more of that precious background blur. But the Sony, well, it's a Sony. I'm going to put them through our 10-point lens test to see which one you should get. Let's get started. For the handheld vlogging test, you can see the 20mm gives me a wide angle of view. It makes it easier for me to hold the camera close to me, thus letting me hold it for a little longer, especially on a big gimbal like this. It shows lots of the background, but maybe the most important thing is this lets me turn on active stabilization. Let's do that same test again, still with the Sony 20mm f1.8, but with steady shot turn on to active. With steady shot active mode, the camera is cropping in, removing some of the shake in my walk. It also gives me a narrower field of view, more like a 24mm. So you can see having a super wide angle lens that you can crop into has some benefits. Let's try the Sigma. First, you can see I put it on my gimbal and the lens is so heavy that I'm going to have to rebalance the entire gimbal. Attaching the Sigma, I immediately feel it in my arms. I would not be able to vlog nearly as long as I could with the lighter weight Sony. But this Sigma is giving me an f1.4 aperture, so it's blurring the background just a little bit more. The low light performance should be a little bit better. So I'm carrying more, my right arm is a little more tired, but I should be getting better performance. Let's take a freeze frame and examine the bokeh produced by each of them. You can see the Sigma on the left produces a more blurry background, separating me from that background better. And this really helps in vlogging situations where you have a cluttered background and you want your audience to focus on you. Thus, the Sigma is the more versatile lens, even if it is heavier. For the Starburst test, I point both lenses into the sun and set them to their highest f-stop number. We can see at f16, the Sigma has 22 points, meaning it has 11 aperture blades. The Sony has 9 aperture blades and thus 18 points. Ignoring the dust spots, I actually think the Sony's flaring looks a little bit better. On the Sigma, we see this big circular flaring from reflections off the internal elements and this purple flaring here. The Sony is surprisingly cleaner. Still, the Starburst test is subjective. Maybe you prefer having more points, or maybe you prefer the cleaner Starburst. Take your pick. And now for the astrophotography test. I brought both lenses out to shoot the stars. And for this first test, I shot them both at f1.8. I expect the Sigma on the left to do better because it's shut down 2/3 of a stop while the Sony is forced to shoot wide open. But actually, the Sony is noticeably sharper. I focused and refocused many times. These are the best results I got with each lens. Throughout the frame, in the middle, at the corners, at the edges, the Sony is better throughout. But the Sigma can shoot at f1.4. That allows it to gather more light and should produce noticeably cleaner images that pull in more distant stars. And we can see, indeed, the Sigma wide open is significantly brighter, but is it sharper? Oddly, no. The Sony is still sharper here. And while the Sigma does have less noise, we can see more of these dim stars. Shooting wide open, the Sigma wasn't especially sharp for astro. So this is shocking to me, but the slower Sony is what I would recommend for astrophotography. Our backlighting test checks for contrast, which is important for landscape photographers shooting sunrises and sunsets into the sun, and portrait photographers who rely on this type of backlighting. We can see the Sigma is the clear winner. It has so much less bloom than the Sony does, shooting at f1.8. Zooming into the eye, we can see the Sigma is significantly cleaner. Note these horizontal lines here. This seems to be light reflecting off the Sony a7R4's phase detect autofocus sensors. It's not a problem with either of the lenses, it's just a quirk of Sony cameras in severe backlighting. If we shoot the Sigma wide open at f1.4, you can see the bloom here does get a little bit worse and the contrast suffers a little bit, but that's one of the benefits of having an f1.4 lens, the ability to shut down and get improved image quality. For the macro test, I got as close as I could to this flower by setting each lens to the minimum focusing distance and then pulling in until they were nice and sharp. You can see the Sony lets me get a little bit closer, but is it more detailed in the center? Yeah, it's also more detailed. It's close, but for close-up work, the Sony's a little bit better. For the sharpness test, I put the 60 megapixel a7R4 on a tripod with a delayed shutter and set it to take 240 megapixel pixel shift files. Surprisingly, the Sony is a little wider. You can see here it goes past the edges of these cameras while the Sigma crops in. Let's check the details. Zooming in 400%, we can see the texture of the paper on both of them. This is an outrageous amount of detail, but indeed, the Sony at f1.8 does show more detail than the Sigma. The Sony, despite being smaller, seems to be sharper. Let's check the edges of the frame. Here, the Sigma has less fringing and does look better, but note I had to manually remove chromatic aberration, which was pretty bad. So for sharpness, the Sony wins at the center and the Sigma wins at the edges. If you're curious about how well the Sigma maintains its sharpness wide open, you can see at f1.4 it is noticeably less sharp than it is at f1.8. So if you are shooting with the Sigma, when you can, shut down a little bit. Let's peek into the background and check the bokeh. We can see both lenses have some soap bubble bokeh, but the Sigma's a little more soap bubbly. However, it's also a little bit bigger and rounder. But let's try shooting it at f1.4. Shooting wide open, we can see significantly bigger bokeh balls on the Sigma, and that is one of the reasons you would get the faster lens to blow the background out more to create a more surreal 3D look with better subject separation. So for the bokeh, it has to be a win for the Sigma. So which is it, the big fast Sigma here or the small portable Sony? Well, the Sony was sharper, and it's significantly more compact, and you could continue to use your Sony professional services if you do that. But the Sigma lets in more light. It gives you more background blur, and it puts $100 back into your pocket. So there really is no clear winner. But for me though, I'm gonna keep my little Sony. I don't mind bringing it along for Milky Way photography, even if it might be cloudy, because it is so small, and actually the astrophotography qualities of it were a little bit better than the Sigma. But there are people I'd recommend this to, like anybody who really wants that bokeh or people who are doing close-up sports photography. By the way, if you like the look of this video, it's being filmed on the Sigma 24mm f1.4. We have a review of that on our channel too. Don't forget to subscribe for more reviews, tutorials, and much more. And check out our books at northrop.photo, currently on sale, because photography education will do more for your pictures than buying new gear. Thanks, bye.